Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brody Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brody, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Maura Sweeney, author of the Art of Happiness book series. Maura, welcome to the show.
Paul, thanks a lot for having me on. I'm thrilled to be with you so we could talk about what it's like to write a book and get it out there on the market.
Excellent. You ready to get started with question number one?
I am.
All right. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Well, this is going to be right in line with everything I'm about, and that is be your most authentic self and use your most authentic voice. The reason why I say that is, sometimes we could look at external things and we try to be perfect. And I don't mean perfect in the sense of grammar, but we try so hard to be pleasers of other people or replicators of somebody else's success. And what I find is that the more we can speak out of our own sense of authenticity, our voice, whether we write the book or someone is helping us and guiding us in the writing of it, that it's our authentic self, it's our message. It's not something that we borrowed from somebody else, but it's something that we feel passionate about, something that we've worked on in our lives, an idea we want to really put forth. So that would be it. Be your most authentic self with your most authentic voice, because people will resonate and they'll respond to it. There's something that's like more and more, I think, people could tell the difference between a pretender and someone who's really speaking from the heart or giving it to you straight. And I think people are really looking for what's real these days. And the backup to that, I would say, is allow the process of writing your book to hone and develop you. Because sometimes we may have an idea, it's in our mind, but the process between having it in our heads as a concept and actually getting it down on paper, it takes time, it is a process, but allow the process to hone you and develop you, because it's in that process that you chisel out those things that maybe aren't you, and you put into the book the things that really are, or the most important points. So that would be my advice.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Well, you know what? This you probably wouldn't be aware of, but a number of years ago, my husband and I were actually publishers, and we had brought a preschool series of books to a national market. And what got us into publishing back then, Paul, was that we were representing this great author. And when we started going around to the big publishing houses, we realized it was really, really hard to get in there. And even if you did get a big publishing house to represent you, the chances of ever making any money after your book was published were, I think it was maybe 4% of all the authors that were published would actually get anything beyond their initial check. And so we kind of learned back in the day that was the primary way of getting a book published, which seems like, whoa, it's really hard. And then that was how we ended up finding out about a lot of these other independent presses, or they call them vanity presses. And as everybody knows, and you know well, is being a self-published author. So I would say maybe at this point, maybe the most challenging thing is, which route do you want to take? How much control do you want over the over the process, and how much of it do you want to make your own versus maybe a corporate entity? So that's part of it. And I would also say the hardest part about getting published is somewhat overcoming your own sense of personal doubt, to say, well, you know what? I already wrote the book. Now, am I good enough? Do I believe I'm good enough to get it out there in print and get my name behind it and put all of my effort and my confidence behind it? So part of it is maybe a strategic thing in terms of how do you want to get the book published? But beyond that, it really turns into, do I believe in my ideas and in my work enough to actually get behind it and start promoting it?
Well, and speaking of promotions, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that has worked well.
Okay. My books, this is the way I did it. I love to promote other people. In my whole background, this is what I do. I create stars out of other people. But when it came to self-promotion, I have to say I was uncomfortable with it. So what I did that actually worked out quite well for me, Paul, is that I found a way to be interviewed on other people's shows where they might have a podcast, a radio show, um, and sometimes it was even things in print that were around the topics that were in my books. And a lot of my books happen to deal with the things that most people face in life and how do they see life and how do they see their troubles and how do they see themselves coming out of life challenges with a better perspective. So rather than being the one who was always self promoting, saying, hey, here's my book, go buy it, or aren't I great? I discovered the fine art of putting myself into places where show hosts, podcast hosts, TV hosts even needed someone of my persuasion to help be a guest on their show. So I was helping them with their own mission. And then also in the process, it gave me credibility and influence where other people would tout my work. And for me, that has been very helpful. I've probably been on, I know it's over 300 shows. And in each case, they know I'm the author of the Art of Happiness series. So it helps me with my ideas, getting them out there, but it also helps my profile. And I would say if anyone likes to talk, not every book author likes to talk, and if they're idea people, that is a very helpful way of getting others to promote you rather than you promoting you directly.
Well, and the other thing too is, you just have to be able to be comfortable with getting outside of your comfort zone, because not every author necessarily wants to promote their book. And that's one of the biggest things that you have to realize is when you are publishing a book, you're expected to do the marketing, whether it's through a traditional publisher or doing it yourself, and even certain phases with going through a hybrid. Because as a hybrid, I always want my clients to get on as many podcasts as possible in local radio, and we help them do it. But they also have to be comfortable with being able to do that, because it's not for everyone.
You know, I'm so glad you said stepping out of your comfort zone. Who was the man that wrote, I shouldn't remember his name, but he wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul series?
It's on the
Do you remember him?
it's on the tip
He's
of
so
my tongue.
famous.
Yeah.
I know. Anyway, I listened to him speak on a few occasions, and I remember him saying that after he wrote his book, he figured everybody would want to buy it. He had no idea that he needed to promote his book.
Hmm.
And I do know this even from being in New York City around some of the main publishing houses. Things have changed so dramatically that even if you do get your book published by a large publishing house, they require you to have a big social media following and literally to be the engine behind your work. So it's very true nowadays. You can write a book, but no matter where you are, you're going to have to get behind that book and find a way to promote it. The other thing too, you said getting out of your comfort zone. There are people that might write a book, and I've discovered this as well, and they are really quiet people. They like using pen, putting pen to paper, but actually getting out there and speaking is getting out of the comfort zone. But remember I said in the first question when you said, what's the one piece of advice you could be, or you could give to someone? And I said, well, be your most authentic self and voice. But secondly, allow the process to hone and develop you. I can tell you that when I started writing, I had people in writing seminars telling me I wasn't being honest. And it was really a challenge because I probably was shy personally, even though I'm socially outgoing, but personally shy. And so over and over again, I had to step out of my comfort zone. It's a big thing, putting your name on an idea, putting your name to a book cover and saying, I'm standing behind this, but the process itself helps develop the author and also gives extra credence and weight to what's inside the pages of the book. And it might be stepping out of the comfort zone, which, by the way, happens to be the title of the first in my Art of Happiness series, Stepping Outside the Comfort Zone. But it's true. We all have to do that. And it's a growing process.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of books, what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Well, I'm always stymied by this question because I don't have one favorite one. Sometimes I'll give people the most recent one I read, but this is the way I'd love to answer this question. My favorite books, plural, are biographies. Biographies, especially that start at the beginning of a person's life and take you all through the arc of life in terms of somebody has an idea. They're in the middle of a history or the middle of a time period or in the middle of a circumstance that is providing them with such a hurdle to what they envision doing. So whether they are, a scientist that's going to come up with a cure for cancer, or someone who is going to be a real social changer, or someone that's going to be a dignitary in government, whatever. From the time I was a very young girl, and I think this is where I learned about the power of the written word and the power of books, I read every single biography in our elementary school library because I could identify with idea people and people who were dreamers from the time they were little. And I would read these biographies to follow their life story. And what I discovered about biographies of great people who really were movers and changers and advancers of society is that the challenge in everyone's life in these biographies became the stepping stone to their greatness. And so that's why I have to always answer that question the same way. Biographies are my favorite book, taking people from where they were to where they wanted to go and watching them and kind of living with them in the middle of the story through the process. And I discovered that that's something that relates to every single one of us. There's a bigger one of us inside each and every one of us. And as we allow ourselves to exit our comfort zones, to step out, to try new things, and really, I would say, put our feet out into the territory that we want to step into, it is one of the most frightening things, but also one of the most empowering things. So how's that for what's your favorite book? The biographies of great people.
It's actually my favorite genre as well, so you cannot go wrong with a good biography. So for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Well, in addition to writing the Art of Happiness series, I've also done a couple of other things, one of which is to put together my favorite happiness quotes. I'm also known as the ambassador of happiness. So I went and I found all of my favorite quotes about happiness that all connected with my whole Art of Happiness series, which is living life happy from your insides out rather than having the world dictated to you. So here's one I got from Hosea Ballou. And I know you're going to say to me, who the heck is he? I don't remember. But anyway, let me tell you. Here's what Hosea Ballou said. Real happiness is cheap enough, yet how dearly we pay for its counterfeit. It's the close cousin to, remember the old adage, money can't buy you happiness? And think about it. Real happiness is cheap enough, yet how dearly we pay for its counterfeit. And I just love that because I think that each one of us could find our own sense of happiness without having to buy our way into it. There's a happiness that lives inside of us and a rest. And if I could come full circle to your first question, and our own authenticity, that once we find it, we feel very peaceful and very satisfied from within.
Maura, I want to thank you for being a guest on this show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Oh, I would love for them to visit me on my website. It's my name, Maura, M as in Mary, Aura, followed by the number 4 and the letter U.com. So Maura4U.com, and they can subscribe to my blog. They can find my books. They could subscribe to my podcast as well. So thank you.
Well, Maura, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thanks, Paul, and great to you too.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.